I get asked a lot, why did you start drinking? Did something terrible happen to you when you were 15? Because terrible things do happen to 15-year-old girls, I get that. And the scary thing is that no, nothing happened. Nothing. I had a really nice family. I had amazing parents, I still do. I had great friends. I was never particularly confident. I was never particularly attractive. I was, always one of the really awkward teenagers. I just loved it. I just felt like I fitted in my own skin, if that makes sense. And it was such an amazing feeling. It kind of felt like a big quilt being wrapped around you, where you didn't worry about anything, where you couldn't really feel anything. And I don't even know why I didn't want to feel anything at 15. I can't even tell you. It was like being in love. I knew something was wrong because sometimes, like one of those kaleidoscopes where you're looking through it and everything clicks into place. Sometimes, really occasionally, the kaleidoscope would click into place just for a split second, and you'd know what was wrong, and you'd know something was terribly wrong, and you didn't know quite why it was alcohol, but it was. Every time the kaleidoscope clicked into place and all the colours made sense, I'd go off again and there would be an excuse for a drink, because there's always someone that drinks more than you. There's always someone a little bit more messed up than you, so it was always okay. I've never had enough to drink. Never in my life have I had enough to drink. And thank God, really, because then I would be dead.
There come a lonely night, I can't escape my mind. From a broken bough, fall into finite space, with a roof torn down, this house is an empty place. For so lack of concern, it might make you sad. Like a fluttering bird in a dream you had. Here come the lonely night, can't escape my mind.
This is me. This is actually the only photo of me holding a can of beer. My name is Arthur Corty, and I am one of the few people in Britain who don't drink. That's how it feels anyway. That's not to say I've never tried it. I have. I just never liked it. Even as a teenager, when all my friends were out drinking, I always preferred to be out shooting silly films, making music, or sitting in my bedroom trying to save humanity from the latest threat of Armageddon. I even tried my hand at pro wrestling. I always had something more interesting to do. Alcohol just didn't stand a chance. But I saw the effects of it all around me. At home, on the streets.
Fuck off! Fuck off!
You haven't had enough of this time!
And Willie's been loving it!
On TV, in the news.
Britain's got a major drinking problem.
1 in 5 of all deaths are caused by alcohol.
Britain's binge drinking culture.
Binge drinking.
Binge drinking.
40 Jaegers!
Wherever I looked, people were getting pissed. So why do we do it?
The British drink more than every other culture because they can handle it. And because we know how to have fun.
Yeah, it doesn't look that fun, but maybe it's just me.
Alcohol is a potential menace to community safety as well as to his personal health.
No, absolutely, we should ban it entirely. It's the only obvious thing to do is get rid of this scourge completely.
Well, that sounds like a terrible idea.
Violence, wanton destruction, and utter lawlessness.
I think we can all agree we've built up a pretty bad reputation for ourselves when it comes to drinking. But this obsession with alcohol is nothing new. It's something that's been around for hundreds of years.
For most of human history, and certainly until the late 19th century, water was basically unsafe to drink. In the 16th, 17th century, tea, coffee, soft drinks are all unavailable. So you find that old, young, even children are drinking beer. They would drink a variety of beer called small beer, perhaps a little bit stronger than modern day shandy. Working men felt that it gave them health and strength.
Beer gives you muscle.
Men in hard physical jobs particularly would be drinking vast amounts. They would be drinking up to 3 gallons of beer a day. And in the early 18th century, gin drinking reached what people have seen as an epidemic or a craze. Of course, it's epitomised most famously by Hogarth's depiction of Gin Lane. Basically, you could produce it and sell it more or less anywhere. So not only public houses sold gin, but grocers' shops, general stores also sold gin, so you'd go in and buy some basic items and also have a shot of gin on the side. They also used to sell the stuff on the streets. People would go around selling gin to the spectators at public executions. And then the First World War had a big impact. Because the government, and particularly the Ministry of Munitions and later Prime Minister Lloyd George, identified drink as a real threat to the war effort. Famously, he said, "We are fighting Germany, Austria and drink, but the greatest enemy is drink." In the Second World War, the government saw drink and pubs as essential to maintaining morale. It was thought important to try and keep up a reasonable supply of beer to the troops. There used to be a phrase, beer and Britannia. The French were identified with wine, so the English were identified with beer.
Well, yes, rather.
In more modern times then, from the 1950s and 60s, alcohol consumption has continued to rise. From the 1980s, it became a particular concern. In the 80s, associated with football hooliganism or the lager lout phenomenon.
All we're going for is a good game of football, a good punch up and a good piss up.
And then in the later 20th century, the binge drinking phenomenon. And one of the government's aims in the 2003 Licensing Act was to try and persuade us to adopt a more, what they like to think of as continental style of drinking, where we drink sensibly as they do allegedly in French cafes, having cultural conversations, rather than binge drinking and falling out of pub doorways as allegedly we're behaving here.
I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I drink sometimes once a week, and only if I am in a restaurant. I never drink alone in my home, or if I'm alone with my kids and my family, I never drink.
La dernière fois que j'ai bu, c'était samedi dernier.
D'accord. Et ça s'est bien fini?
Ouais, non, très bien. 2-3 verres, donc on est rentré en taxi, ça s'est super bien passé, et voilà, c'était une bonne soirée.
We don't drink to be drunk. We drink in order to appreciate the wine or the alcohol.
My opinion about the British people, the first thing I would think about them is binge drinking.
Les différences, c'est ça, de quand on boit ou pas. Je sais pas, pour moi, les Français, c'est surtout en soirée, le soir, à des moments précis, alors que les Anglais, c'est un peu n'importe quand dans la journée. Je crois que même à 10h du matin, c'est possible que les Anglais y boivent.
Ouais, parce que les Anglais ils boivent beaucoup d'alcool parce qu'il fait froid là-bas. Non, j'en sais rien, je dis ça comme ça.
I think they don't know what to do, and they have no interest in their life, and maybe they think that the only way to have fun is to drink.
Personnellement, on a toujours eu les Anglais, on les a vus comme des gros buveurs. Il y a aussi la série Skins qui a montré aussi le penchant un peu drogué, même si ça doit être un peu exagéré, je pense. Mais ils sont plus décontractés que les Français par rapport à tout ce qui est alcool, soirée, fête. C'est plus démesuré là-bas.
I think the first time I had alcohol, it was for my birthday when I was 13, just one drink.
My daughter is 15 and she doesn't drink alcohol. For their birthday, they have the right to put the finger in the glass and to taste it. And normally they hate it, and I'm very happy about that.
quite famously, people know that in France and Italy, for example, quite young children are allowed or encouraged to drink a bit of wine with dinner with their parents. In the UK, young people anyway tend to have fewer meals with adults than they do in other countries and to spend more time with their friends. We tend to eat earlier in the UK, and that means that parents are often not home from work. On the continent, they often eat dinner later. It sounds like a small thing, but it completely changes the dynamic of the family environment.
In this country, there has not been a culture of respecting alcohol, respecting the manufacture of alcohol or the produce of wine and things like that. We have never had that culture.
You can be on the continent, France, Spain for example, and observe a group of young people in their late teens or early 20s happily socialising over a coffee, over a milkshake, and alcohol isn't the point of purchase, it's the social contact with each other. Whereas it's quite unusual to find that phenomena in the UK in the early evening, is that young people would be socialising in a non-alcohol environment in that way.
We're well known as a nation of boozers, really, in Britain. There isn't really any stigma about being seen drunk in public. I think that's quite surprising from people in different countries. In the US, I don't think you see that kind of binge drinking, public drunkenness culture in quite the same way.
There is obviously the kind of spring break culture of kind of going out and getting absolutely ripped for 3 or 4 weeks. But outside of spring break, I think they're a little bit more, quite a lot more disapproving of drunken behaviour. I don't think Americans tolerate drunkenness anything like the extent that we do.
So the French seem to think we're a bunch of pissheads, but what do the Americans think? So when you think about Britain and British culture, what comes to mind?
Bangers and mash, fish and chips, pubs.
Soccer, drinking games.
Tea and crumpets, and bad teeth, sorry. Guinness.
The Brits like to drink. I mean, they love to drink. They wake up in the morning and the first thing out of the fridge is grabbing a beer.
When I was living in London, I drank every day, 7 days a week, and it was definitely way more than I ever drank in America.
It's like when you're there at 5 o'clock every day, every business person goes to the pub. I think it's like kind of ingrained in their culture that you go to work, you go to the pub, and then you go home.
When I was in London, I was amazed by the fact that there were no open container laws and that everyone was in the streets drinking. It seemed like such a communal activity that everyone could do together out in the streets. And I definitely think there's not as much of a stigma as there is in the United States.
I don't think anyone gives a crap in the UK when you go out and drink. It's a lot more acceptable.
I watched this documentary and they had an ambulance that drives around, I think it's London, and picks up drunk people and hooks them up to an IV so that they don't die at night. I don't remember if it drops them off like at the hospital or at home, but it's crazy.
The age limit is 21 here, it's 18 over there, so that has a lot to do with it.
So much more of being young is drinking. It's like that's how they have fun.
I've talked to people who were British who were camp counselors, and they were like, my brother bought a keg at 15. So I really think they're just very relaxed about it.
As you get older and here, you drink a lot less, but there you could still, even if it's one drink, you kind of just have a drink every day.
So yeah, pretty much the same as the French.
You may see a certain similarity, at least on the surface, between the famous pub and the corner bar in the cities of America. The pub, which is practically an institution in Britain, is something like the stateside corner bar, only more so. It's more like a friendly club, a neighborhood gathering place, where men can meet to share the quiet pleasures of a glass of beer and conversation, where nothing is hurried, a little world all its own.
It's changed completely. I mean, it's happened slowly and fairly insidiously. And I think when things happen slowly, you don't really notice until you suddenly turn around one day and think, oh my God, things have really changed.
All I have to say to someone is that look outside your front door, walk down the street. What building do you come to first, which is a public service for the public? And often it's a public house. It's a place to consume alcohol.
If you look at a typical city centre or town centre in the UK, it tends to be populated by lots of pubs and clubs, which has been brilliant because it's spawned a great music culture here. But what it doesn't have is lots of outside space for socialising. And on the continent, you tend to see big open town squares where adults and young people socialise in close proximity. And there seems to be an association between that kind of socialising and a healthier attitude to alcohol, for obvious reasons, because you see parents and adults consuming alcohol over dinner in a more responsible, normal way. So there's kind of these countervailing, very deep-rooted forces at work which prevent young people from having the exposure to responsible adult drinking that you see they have on the continent.
Out of the slime and darkness it comes to inflict its life-destroying poison on the careless, the unwary, the unprotected. No sane person would deliberately expose himself to its venom. No intelligent person would venture within striking distance of its fangs. Yet today, young people are flirting with a poison every bit as deadly as that of the snake.
Thank you, children. Now, let's get back to work.
I think it all starts down with people being influenced by either their parents or older brothers and sisters, or your mates' older brothers and sisters. And I think if you see them having a good time and you see them getting drunk, and that's how it sort of starts.
I'd say it's more a sort of cultural thing now. It's something that we've all sort of been brought up with. It's something that when you go out, you just automatically start drinking alcohol now with your mates.
Drinking becomes almost associated with having fun, and people think to have a good time they have to drink, and they get into a cycle like that.
We've had the school nurse come in. She showed us some different bottles of alcohol and said, don't drink this, it's bad for you.
Alcohol is bad. You shouldn't drink alcohol. And as for drugs, well, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. Okay.
Telling you that you can't do something as a young person, doesn't that makes you want to do it?
Can do, yeah.
That first drink isn't very enjoyable, I can tell you. It burns your insides and it makes your eyes water.
We had more education on how not to climb up an electric pylon than we did on alcohol. We didn't get anything on alcohol until we were about 16, like in our last years of school, and by that time everyone had already done it, so it was sort of a bit, why are you telling us this now?
My children at the age of 8 and 10 haven't had any tuition in that, and I think, well, why not? School isn't just about academic ability, it's about social integration as well. So I think that is weak in this country.
It's not even mandatory. It's an absolute disgrace. We'll just give them all the academic stuff, we'll have our league tables, but when it comes to actually doing practical work in schools around health of young people and well-being for their potential that can actually fuel the rest of their work that they do, it doesn't happen.
They ask you a few questions, it's like an hour in a year.
I don't know if we did have any talks about alcohol, I can't remember them.
60% of schools are only giving one lesson a year, if that, and what they're using in the classroom is not evidence-based.
But at high school age, even though your mind seems mature, your body isn't, and alcohol is a violent narcotic.
I just question putting all the responsibility with schools, because it's not like the other stuff you learn in school, like maths, it's not factual, it's an attitude, and so whatever they say in a lesson can't really fight against everything else around you in the world that you're learning.
I believe it's parents and just generally the way you're brought up in home.
Parents obviously play a massive part in how their children grow up.
This is a middle-class problem that's done behind closed doors, where just the way in which we behave around drink, the way we talk about it, the way we use it, can impact on the behaviour of our children without realising it.
When a man can't or thinks he can't measure up, he looks for a crutch, something to help him. He takes a drink.
Don't look at our children's behaviour, look at your own. Thank you.
We probably haven't, with our parents, spoken about drinking a lot. Other than maybe we've come home after a party and been vomiting everywhere there, and they just said, you really shouldn't drink so much. But actually we're not dealing with the why. Why did you get absolutely off your face?
When I was sort of 19, 20, 21 and it was all kicking off and going a bit mad, I didn't really understand that I could do anything different because everyone that I saw around me was in the madness as well. I think we could do with educating our teens in Britain before they sort of head on into the madness.
As the sun goes down, society fades away, and what emerges from the shadows is a monster of low inhibitions, aggression, and casual chaos. It's almost like every night we go to war with ourselves. On one side, you've got the police, the emergency services, the council, and various groups of volunteers. And on the other side, you've got, well, everybody else.
Are you fucking videoing this? Fuck your mum, bruv!
We fight and we fight. It's just that nobody ever wins.
You go out to get off your face. You go out and you drink a load. And that's what most people understand by binge drinking. Some countries will define that as having 6 units of alcohol. Now that's only 2/3 of a bottle of wine. That doesn't feel like a binge to most British people. You know, it might to people in other countries, but to a lot of British people, that doesn't feel like a binge.
Drank a lot in the early days when I first started, 10, 12 pints a day, every day.
I could go out and drink 20 pints of lager and, walk home okay.
I mean, I see people who are drinking 1.5 bottles of vodka a day. That's a lot. If you drank that right now, you might die. But to them, they're just maintaining an equilibrium.
We have this kind of phrase, binge drinking, making out that actually in between these mad sessions of alcohol, people aren't using anything at all, but that's not what's happening. People are drinking all the time.
I binge drink like hell. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I drink every day. I'm gonna die soon, but it's not too bad. I live my life. If we had no alcohol, no cigarettes, if we had none of that, this place would be so boring. So boring. It's like fast food. If we never had fast food, what would we eat? We'd eat nothing. It would be horrible.
If anybody makes a statement that, in Europe it's better, I always say, well, where's the evidence? I think in Europe, as opposed to Britain, Europe is different.
Well, there is evidence because liver disease is going up here and in most of Europe it's going down, so surely that suggests that it is worse here.
That's possible.
In the past 10 years, the number of people who are under 30 who are going to hospital for liver problems caused by alcohol has gone up by 117%. And in particular regions of the country, it's even higher. So in the northeast of England, it's gone up by 400%. These are catastrophic levels of liver damage taking place. It's really unusual in the rest of Europe to see people in their 20s or 30s with liver disease, but it's something that's happening to a whole generation of people in Britain.
I bet you've left you left some of your Chinese on the floor.
You will always see people joking about a drunk and thinking that's great, and I laugh at that as well, and I think it's very funny, but actually it's rather sad.
Dude, I called you an ambulance, alright? Called you an ambulance.
I'm not sure there are many responsible drinkers in this world. I'm certainly can't claim to be a responsible drinker.
The medics told us to stop filming while they helped this guy covered in sick. Then they turned around and started laughing at us. They accused us of wasting their time, because this guy was only pissed, and the fact that we were actually concerned for his health was apparently really funny. It just goes to show how normalised scenes like this are on our streets, and how we've all essentially become numb to it.
Their ethos is, we could be attending an incident that could be far more serious, and we've got to be here with you, and you have put yourself in that condition. And I totally agree with them.
Go to A&E any night and it's full of people who've broken things, or, you know, of blood everywhere, or completely disoriented, or, you know, somebody's attacked them, or they've attacked somebody and the person's hit back, you know, and they don't really know how they've got there because they're drunk.
As a GP, a huge proportion of my time is taking up with dealing with people with alcohol problems, and it's not just dealing with the patients, it's dealing with their families, it's dealing with the social, the psychological wreck that results from having one member of the family who has alcohol problems. But I've seen patients where I've gone in to talk to them and have made it perfectly clear to them that they are going to kill themselves if they don't stop drinking, and their response is, if those are my choices, I'm ready to die.
Violence is a significant challenge for us. 50% of that violence we know to be fueled by alcohol. It impacts families, it impacts children, it puts a load on our hospitals, and of course it puts a huge load on policing. And where would people want their police? Not policing bars and clubs at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but actually available during the day to reassure people and be solving crimes and doing the sort of things that police do. So if 50% of violent crime, with all the damage that it does, is alcohol related, again, there is no case. We must do something about this.
So in terms of economic cost, what are we actually looking at here?
Alcohol costs the country £21 billion every year.
And that's the best estimate we have. That's the one that has the kind of clearest evidence base behind it, but it's not perfect, and other people have estimated that it's higher.
And that's broken down into the cost of crime itself, lack of productivity, and NHS costs.
In 2011, we had about 1.2 million hospital admissions related directly to alcohol in the UK, and that's an increase in the last 10 years of about 135%.
I mean, the situation that we're in at the moment is absolutely horrendous. If we don't literally address it right now, I wouldn't like to think of where we're actually going to be.
Whenever a person in the public eye comes out and tells the world that they're in recovery, it inspires thousands of people to try to do the same thing. And I am therefore delighted to nervously introduce Russell Brand to you.
Hello everyone, I'm Russell, I'm an addict. I did that to weed out other addicts. Who here is prepared to admit to having a drug or alcohol? Oh, fucking hell, I'm going to rinse this, it'll be a doddle. But I'm not here like as a famous person or a celebrity or anything, I'm here as a drug addict. Now, as a famous drug addict, I can like raise attention. I'm a professional attention seeker, I do it to a professional standard. I've been highly paid for attention seeking, but I'm here today as what, you know, Chip never fails to remind me that I am a bog standard drug addict. Nothing special, unusual, different, unique about my drug addiction. Very, very ordinary drug addict. In fact, when I first met Chip, 11 and a half years ago, probably now, I'm just over 11 years clean, he said, I remember these words, it was very condemnatory and casually callous. I remember being sort of vaguely offended. Oh, you're a complete garbage head, he said. He said, if you don't stop taking drugs now, you'll be dead in prison or in a lunatic asylum within 6 months. I thought, fuck me, that's a heavy verdict from this guy. But I still didn't think, oh, I better stop then. I just thought, Oh no, just sort of felt a bit desperate. I was hoping to go on holiday.
I drank initially because I used to feel nervous. I didn't like the taste of booze when I first had it, and then I realised, oh my god, it makes me super confident. It felt like it gave me sort of another identity, and I've never been any good at moderating or controlling things. So I'd like drink real cheap booze, like go off licence, get like £7 bottle of like white rum or some dodgy tequila, and I'd sup it throughout the day. And once in a while, if I had a particularly challenging obstacle ahead of me, I'd drink a whole bottle of it, and sort of in a kind of stupor. Both my mates here, Sharon and Martino, both knew me sort of at that time. I remember like a journey from Martino's house in Rome to Sharon, who was meeting me, I think, Stansted Airport that day. I nicked a bottle of vodka, a litre of vodka from duty free in Rome, drank it, and it's only a 2-hour flight, so by the time I arrived in London, I was like a sort of a giddy, delirious idiot. Sharon reminds me that sort of like the security at the airport said, "Can you keep your monkey under control?" I was in a right state, so like you can really mess yourself up with that legal drug alcohol. Here's a serious problem. If you're drinking it excessively, it's going to create problems for yourself in the short term, in the long term, in the medium term. It's a problematic substance. Unless you've got no proclivity towards addiction at all, it's something that you need to be aware of. That's my experience.
The only community that I've ever really felt actually part of, not outside of, is the community of drug addicts and alcoholics. When I was at school, I didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. I'm an only child of a single mother, and I didn't feel like I fitted in my family. There's only one other fucking person. It's hard to develop an identity as an outsider under those conditions. I weren't a recreational drug user, not from the get-go. For me, it was medicinal from the first ever time I took drugs. I was unhappy, I was miserable, I felt lost, I felt alone, and if anyone could offer me anything that would deal with that feeling, I'll have it. But when I was a little kid, chocolate biscuits. When I was an adolescent, pornography. When someone come along with drugs, I'll take it, I'll do it. And I believe that for we drug addicts, alcoholics, it's like we've got a spiritual craving, a yearning, and we don't have the language, we don't have the code to express that in our society. But the feeling won't go away, so you've got to nullify it, anaesthetise it somehow. I can't live with it. I can't be alive. I can't be alive unless I'm living in kind of love and community with other people. I can't cope with it. My only other option is to take drugs. That's my only other option, because the feelings behind my drug use and my alcoholism, they ain't gone nowhere.
Some drugs are great fun. All drugs can be fun used correctly. It's like booze as well. It does a lovely job, but then on occasions loosening people up. But when there are social conditions like we have currently, where there's kind of economic deprivation and the kind of sort of, where there's no sort of moral or spiritual centre to our life, I think it's really easy for all drugs to play too significant a role in a culture, and I think that's happened with booze in this country.
When I see bankers taking our money and doing exactly what they want with it, and when they get in trouble, we have to bail them out. Are you for real?
We could start by shooting all the bankers, hanging all the politicians.
A socialist society's got to be better than this.
God save our gracious Queen. Long live our noble Queen. God save our Queen.
Fuck the Tories, fuck Margaret Thatcher, and I look forward to her being worm food.
You are a hideous, disgusting excuse for a human being, and I'm so glad you're dead. Cheers!
In a society where people are feeling lost, hopeless, disenfranchised, then they are going to turn to alternative ways of dealing with that. And you can either choose drugs or you can choose alcohol.
So when stuff in our life gets too much, we just turn to alcohol because it's so easy to do that.
Even small amounts of alcohol may provide an illusion of relaxation. The person usually feels confident that everything is all right.
You know, our government has done its best to curtail people's access to any other
other form of drug. You know, that's certainly something that really needs to be understood right from the beginning, is that alcohol is a drug, as is marijuana, as is coffee. But it's a question of having a look at which are most constructive and which are most detrimental. But most of the information and the facts that I know about alcohol have come from mainly Professor Nutt. Well, as he said in the BBC, alcohol is more harmful than heroin or crack when the overall dangers to the individual and society are considered, according to a study in The Lancet.
So heroin is not dangerous?
Heroin, of course, heroin's dangerous. Heroin's very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend anyone to take it. The media tend to take a very sensationalist, very hysterical view about drugs.
You've compared the dangers of ecstasy to horse riding.
Well, obviously you haven't read the paper, have you?
Notorious drugs gang. Ecstasy and speed.
Illegal drugs.
Drugs.
Shoot the drug!
So a few years ago, I started to get interested in the relative harms of drugs. Why are some drugs legal, some drugs illegal? And we pulled together an expert panel, and we used this new technique called multi-criteria decision analysis. And that looked at all the kinds of harms that a drug can do, from whether it can kill you when you take it, to whether it actually causes environmental problems. We discovered there were 16 separate harms, and we ranked all the drugs on those harms, and then we weighted the harms. And amazingly, out of that, to my surprise, alcohol came top. Alcohol was the most harmful drug in the UK. And when you look at the reasons for that, you see it's because the social harms of alcohol are so enormous. The harms due to health costs, due to road traffic accidents, due to violence in the streets, domestic violence, those are the ones that make alcohol in the UK the most harmful drug.
For anybody who fools around with this, adult or minor, is playing with dynamite.
The drug laws do not reflect the science. They do not reflect the harms. Therefore, they are wrong, i.e. they're unjust. Promoting that statement to society was a necessary thing, because unjust laws are bad laws. What I discovered was that the government did not want that message. So, as I was promoting this rational approach, the politicians were saying, hang on, this cuts right against the way we want to portray the world. And eventually they got irritated with me and sacked me.
Do you stand by what you said in 2009 that got you sacked?
Well, yeah, I do. And I think actually since then I've realised there's been greater problems as a result of some of the failure to be logical about drugs. It sort of implied that basically governments could do what they like with scientists. They don't like the evidence that scientists come up with. They get rid of the scientists, shoot the messenger. Science is critical to defining the scale of the problem and finding solutions. So if you're going to get rid of people who say things you don't like, you're going to end up almost certainly making the situation worse.
He hadn't done his homework.
It's those same weasel words he's sticking to.
They even bought and paid for his leadership.
Once again, the Prime Minister doesn't know his facts.
I'd suggest a different line of questioning. The question has been asked. Let's hear the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Prime Minister will want to thank all those fantastic NHS staff who are rolling up their sleeves and doing everything they can to reduce avoidable early deaths. They're asking the Prime Minister for minimum unit pricing in order to help them do their job and stop people falling into addiction in the first place. Minimum pricing is sitting nervously on death row. Will the Prime Minister give it a reprieve, at least until we know the outcome from the Sheffield report and the Scottish courts?
What we will be able to introduce is something the last government never did, which is to say it should be illegal to sell alcohol below the price of duty plus VAT. That is something, in all the binge drinking problems we had under Labour, they never managed to do.
My Lords, minimum unit pricing will not be taken forward at present, but it will remain a policy under consideration.
I think this minimum unit pricing is a big part of the answer.
So said David Cameron last year. But when it comes to tackling cheap booze in England and Wales, it seems he doesn't have the support he thought he had.
It's kind of political suicide to start talking about raising price of alcohol across the board. And I think when Cameron came out in favour of, in fact, not just in favour, but announced this was going to happen, it was quite a surprise, I think, for a lot of people.
The government's own department in 2008 showed that increasing the price of alcohol led to a steep decline in alcohol consumption and was the most effective way of dealing with it. Why then has the government changed its mind? It announced its intention to increase alcohol pricing. It was widely welcomed. Why does it ignore the evidence on something which is very urgent, which could save lives, reduce hospital admissions and reduce crime?
What's happened to it since then is, I think, a fairly familiar tale of what happens to government policies when they run up against powerful interests who don't want them to happen. And what you have is who's got the most powerful lobbyists and how do they get their way.
It was interesting why there was so much opposition to minimum pricing.
I feel that there's a lot more questions to be asked than just a simple thing of minimum pricing.
The young people who go out on a Friday or Saturday night think nothing of spending £50 or up to £100 with taxis and drink and everything else.
This is an anti-competitive suggestion which is only going to hurt legitimate consumers.
There is an evidence base that minimum pricing works. You know, come on, it's quite obvious. So countries where it's happened, Canada is the most recent example, see a huge improvement. The libertarian argument about minimum pricing, which that people should be free to choose, is sort of taken away or mitigated by the fact that with alcohol, people drink and the harm they do is not just to themselves, it's to others.
Well, there's the result. Just another victim of a drunk driver.
Part of the problem with alcohol is our drug policy is driving up use. Alcohol is too liberally available, and the other drugs are too constrained.
My personal opinion on having drugs illegal at this point in history, it's medieval mentality practiced by medieval politicians to punish an entire class of people.
I don't have a great deal of faith in parliamentary politics, so I went to speak to the Home Office Select Committee.
Hello. Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Brand. Thank you.
Good morning.
Please have a seat.
Whether or not that had an impact, me talking at Home Office Select Committee, I would doubt it. I think it's sort of those kind of things are sort of about display more than function.
For me, what's more significant is the way that we socially regard the condition of addiction. It's something that I consider to be an illness and therefore more a health matter than a criminal or judicial matter. And drug addicts, by the way, don't give a shit if drugs are illegal. It ain't slowing the process down. No one's ever going, oh no! Being arrested isn't a lesson, it's just an administrative blip. You need to demonstrate an awareness of the situation. Otherwise you just seem like you don't know what you're talking about.
The crime,
We've talked about them, you can tell what party they're in from their questions, innit?
What about the victims of the crime?
The government likes alcohol, it likes the tax benefits of alcohol, it likes to essentially continue with this image that alcohol is a safe drug if used responsibly, and it likes the idea of being hard on other drugs because that fits into this sort of attitude that politicians are strong and can make hard decisions. It's one of the great public health scandals of the last century that we do not properly take account of what's happening in terms of alcohol and health damage.
The singer Amy Winehouse has been found dead at her flat. The 27-year-old discovered at the property in North London by emergency services at around 6 minutes to...
We knew that she was an alcoholic. She'd been in rehab. Her family knew she had a problem. They tried to help her. Why did the British public refuse to believe that a woman that we saw as a walking train wreck for years, that she died of alcoholism? Oh no, she must have died of drugs.
I've been banging on about the fact that she hadn't taken drugs for 3 years. Everyone thought I was in denial. I wasn't in denial. She hadn't taken drugs.
She was a tiny, tiny little girl who drank like George Best on a stag night every night of the week. Of course she died of alcohol poisoning, but we don't want to see it. Because it's too frightening.
We should be telling people how dangerous alcohol is, and we should be using examples like her.
Like they say a lot, don't they? Like anyone can get clean, you know, and that is actually really hard. Because the first time someone mentioned to me, try to get to bed tonight without drinking or using, I was like, what? Like, what do you mean it's 7 o'clock? Like, you know, like there's too much day left for that amount of consciousness and awakeness.
strong drinking culture. I think it's sort of expected. It's almost the rites of passage, getting older, your first drink, your first pint. I think it's something that you're expected to do. If you don't drink, you're outside of the norm.
Fucking drop it into 2K14 and start.
It is incredibly entrenched. The baby is born and you wet the baby's head. You know, the 18th birthday party. It's part of life, it's part of everything. It's so bound up, it's a bit like the nuclear bomb. We've got it, we are where we are. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ask questions about it and say, why are we where we are and is it the right place to be?
I was trying to buy a 18th birthday card for a relative of mine last year that did not mention drunkenness and alcohol. And I think I had to look at 25 cards before eventually I found one that was alcohol-free. And that sums it up.
We get wasted when we're happy, we get wasted because we're bored, we get wasted because we're excited, because we're sad, because we're celebrating, because we got married, because we got divorced, because someone was born, because someone died.
He turned water into wine. It was important to Jesus, the ceremony went well, and that guests had enough alcohol to drink.
Well, these guests don't seem to be having any trouble with that. This guy's got loads of alcohol. The groom is drinking, and so's the bride. And him. And her. And that old man over there. Oh wait, it's time for the speeches. Shh, be quiet.
I think I was less successful in convincing Lucy that she wouldn't need half a bottle of champagne this morning at home before the church service. I suppose I should blame myself for turning you into something of an alky, stumbling into the gutter on the way home from your local. I'm absolutely desperate for a proper drink. We always get there eventually, the pub that is. Keep your eyes set on that goal, the great pub of life. When in doubt or at times of stress, find comfort in the bottom of the wine glass. Cheers!
Yeah, some real good advice there. It's almost like this day was just based around alcohol and getting as drunk as possible.
Are you really going to that wedding to watch Jack and Jill get married? No, you're not. You're actually going because you think you've got a free bar. It's not about the ceremony at all. It's all about what's going to happen afterwards.
For several millennia, the Christian church has used wine as a symbol of the blood of Christ. So it's part of what is, I suppose, the major defining social cohesive group, the church.
I often wondered what happened to alcoholics who were Catholic and then had to go and have a sip of wine. You know, there wasn't an alcohol-free. So I think there's something there.
Alcohol is not evil, which the Bible doesn't teach that it is. A Christian taking some wine or an alcoholic drink is quite legitimate as long as they are moderate and self-controlled. I think that religion has a very big influence over people's lives.
So with that in mind and all the references to alcohol in the Bible, do you think Christianity plays a role in the UK's alcohol problem?
Yeah, alcohol in Christianity is a little bit of a controversial subject, but I don't think it's anything to do with Christianity in the UK, because you could go, for instance, to America where Christianity is quite prevalent and you don't have the same problems there. So it's something to do with the mindset that we have here. And a lot of youngsters I talk to, especially here in our city and around our community, they've got no aspirations, they got no vision, they got nothing to aim for, and their lives seem hollow and empty, and they're trying to fill that void with all sorts, and it's drugs, it's sex, and it's alcohol.
We live in a culture now where in many other walks of life we're expected to consume excessively. You know, we're told that consumption is a good thing and we're supposed to desire things, and especially when they're cheap and they're pleasurable.
There is so much evidence of the psychological effect of exposure to the advertising of branded goods, which give you a sense of
you know, what it is to be an adult, what it is to be a sophisticated individual. And I think it really impacts on young people's attitudes to themselves and their self-esteem.
I think one of the most insidious changes we've seen in the last 20 years is the way the drinks industry has tried to get to its consumers younger and younger.
So the invention of Alco Pops, the marketing of Alco Pops by the alcohol industry to attract this new type of drinker.
Designed specifically at getting young people, particularly girls, into alcohol in their teens.
It's in the streets next to schools, it's on our television, it's advertised around sport.
Gerrard! He's got it!
We know that it does get through to young people. We recently did a study of 10 and 11-year-olds and asked them to recognise different types of brands and logos. And 95% of the 10 and 11-year-olds recognised Foster's and Stella Artois, and they didn't recognise cake and ice cream brands. Even we at Alcohol Concern were surprised by those results.
I just see a pattern where in countries where advertising is banned and the advertising industry behaves in a more responsible way in the marketing of goods, young people's lives are less commercialised, they're less exposed to those influences, and they tend to behave in a more responsible way, I mean, with regards to alcohol and consumerism and other products.
Château Noble. Un vin délicieux dans un emballage pratique.
In France, you're allowed to advertise alcohol products, but you can't have all of the imagery and the exotic nature surrounding the advert. You can advertise on the basis of what's in the product, where the product was made, the strength of the product, but you can't have a storyline and characters, and they also don't have alcohol sponsorship of sporting events. So the Heineken Cup in France is called the H Cup, and we think that something similar should happen in Britain.
Interesting bounce here to one side. Birmingham City have triumphed against.
And there's champagne down there from Jensen Butler.
Your point is to stop drugs and alcoholism by just people never starting?
Well, you two believe in this fantasy of addiction in which people lose...
Fantasy of addiction.
A complete fantasy in which people lose all power over themselves and become victims of this terrible, frightening disease.
I'm a person that if I have a drink, I can't stop. And so it would be following your ideology that I'm choosing to do that. That I'm choosing...
That's exactly not my ideology, it is my belief. Yes, you do choose.
It's an obsession of your mind and an allergy of your body. So this is what happens to me. I start thinking about alcohol, I can't stop. I can't stop thinking about it.
And what's the objective physical proof of this inability to stop?
I think it's always very difficult for people who aren't alcoholic or don't have a problem with alcohol to see what it's like to be an alcoholic. It just looks stupid. It looks ridiculous. It's like, just stop it.
It won't happen to everybody. It happens to a minority of people. And that, I think, is why it's difficult for people it doesn't happen to, maybe to get their head around it.
I have an obsession of the mind that compels me to drink. And when I do drink, I have a physical allergic reaction, which manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving. I was a cheat, I was a liar, I was a thief. I was full of resentments and I was full of fear.
If you are the person who is dependent, who has to wake up every morning, and your first kind of thought is, I feel ill, I feel shaky, and I know that what will work is if I have some alcohol, I will immediately feel better. That's kind of in some ways quite a simple existence, but it's really frightening.
People who you might imagine are pillars of society are often hiding all sorts of stories. And the only way we even get a hint of that is within the kind of confessional, if you like, either of the church or the therapy room.
Images like this have become synonymous with our country. But there is a whole other side to alcohol abuse that we don't see.
Fucking hell, man.
This is my Uncle John.
So, I probably
an alcoholic? Probably. Yeah, I got a bit here, look. But that's it. And it's just a sip. You know.
Where's that? Whiskey?
That's whiskey, yes. Do you want some? Okay, no problem. I used to drink wine and beer, you know, all kinds of fucking rubbish. But I don't anymore. I just drink a little bit of whiskey. That's all. But I'm just a sipper. Yeah, I'm not a swigger, you know. All right, I just sip. You can see, you know, Jesus, I haven't touched it. All right.
Whether he sips it or not, he gets through 2 bottles of whiskey every day. This comes to about 80 units of alcohol, which is 26 times his recommended daily limit. He's been diagnosed with Wernicke's encephalopathy, also known as the disease of alcoholics.
It affects me in many ways. I haven't left the house in more than 6 months. All right. I can't. I can't even get to the corner shop these days. All right. So, I don't wear shoes anymore. There's no point. Maria has to do, my wife has to go out and do all the shopping and whatever. All right, and my son has to go to school by himself. And that's okay, that's working. Everything's working.
It's not okay. It's on time when you drink.
What, so sometimes he's better than he is,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes he's worse?
Mm-hmm. Now it's worse. Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been like this?
God. Quite a long time. Quite a long time. I would say about maybe a year. I just fucking lost all comprehension of everything. You know, Maria would come in with some food, which meant nothing. Didn't understand it. Look at it, had not a clue as to what I was supposed to do with this. I could still drink some whiskey. That was okay. But I couldn't understand food at all. I couldn't understand anything, you know.
So you didn't eat for quite a long time?
Yes, a very long time.
Do you eat now?
I'm trying to, force feed myself. Okay, so I'm trying to learn how to eat again.
Here you are.
Here we are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
John, you going to come and eat with us?
No, I'm okay. I've got some whiskey. I couldn't fucking figure it out. I had no idea what the hell was going on. That's when I went into hospital. I went to the Liverpool hospital. God, it was horrible.
How long were you there for?
9 days. They found a little bit of brain damage, not much. And then one of the nurses said, okay, yeah, everything you've taken all your life has caught up with you, which I personally don't believe. It was some kind of, God knows what, Christ, it was a, fucking hell, I can't remember what it was called.
What happened to your face?
Last night, I had a fall in the bathroom. Bad one. Absolutely fucking blood everywhere. I've broken my nose, which is okay, it's straight. So that'll heal by itself. So, not worried about that. I'm starting to get a bit drunk, so it helps.
And that helps, does it?
Yes. Yeah, it does. I spend most of my time in bed, in here. You know, I'm living down here in bed, so I can get to the bathroom. Because I have to go about 20 times a day. Sometimes it's not possible to get to the bathroom. Right, that's pretty difficult. Yeah, I normally wear not jeans, but bathroom, what do you call them?
Pyjamas?
Pyjamas, yes. Yeah, that's what I normally wear, because it can fall through onto the floor, and then I can clean it up, which is not very nice. You know, having to do shit on the floor is not that easy. But I'm sort of getting used to it. Right, it just, you know, just poo comes down here.
How does Patrick feel about your drinking?
Nothing. I don't know. I really don't know. Ow. This is really hurting.
Do you think you'll ever get better?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. It doesn't look good. I really don't think it looks good.
My uncle hasn't always been like this. This was the first time I'd seen him in 3 years, and it was shocking to see how much he had changed. But for me, the most disturbing thing of all is the lack of treatment available for people like him.
Access to treatment is a huge issue. I mean, compared to drug treatment, alcohol is way down the list.
Well, this is a political issue, really. I think the government has focused on opiate users, heroin, cocaine, and that sort of class of drugs.
And I think there's a real stigma still around accessing treatment for alcohol. It's something that's still perceived to be something to be ashamed of, something that people are afraid to admit to themselves and to others that they've got a problem.
About 1.6 million people in England are dependent on alcohol. Yet only about 6% of people with an alcohol dependency problem are receiving treatment. That's not because the other 94% of people don't want to receive it. There is very little alcohol treatment available.
I was asking for help. I realised I was an alcoholic, right? I asked for rehab a year last January, and I couldn't get it, so I stuck myself in prison, right? That's the truth.
I mean, in this town, it's only a small market town, there is us that deals with, we deal with drug and alcohol. Next door, there's a sort of drop-in, fuck about, play pool, don't change your drug use, come in and do something, you know, load of bollocks. But anyway, there is that facility which has been funded by the government for drug problems. There's a methadone distribution centre where you can get your methadone script and various other bits and pieces, which is staffed by about 12 people at least, which is managed at county level by the local drug action team. Alcohol, there's one person who works up the road there. I think there's two now, and they have to deal with the entire alcohol problem of the county. It's ridiculous. Yeah, but for drugs, which isn't even half the problem, thousands of people die of alcoholism. Thousands. Hundreds die of drug dependency. But we've invested everything in drugs.
It's really nice to see you all here for what is a celebration of recovery, and I suppose the one reassuring thing is that we are still here. A lot of rehabs have closed. One called ARA, which had been around for 20 years, closed last week, and small independent rehabs are closing very rapidly indeed, and so it's getting harder and harder, and those people who have been funded through treatment, you are getting luckier and luckier and luckier, because it's becoming something that's going to be very, very difficult to do in the future.
Focus 12 taught me to ask for help, and don't be ashamed. It doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you a stronger person by having the strength to ask, I need help, and then be able to do that.
You know, the last rehab I went to, you know, they were tucking me up in beds, reading me a bedtime story. You know, it wasn't making sense. But Focus 12, there's something unique about what CHIP has formed in that treatment centre that just seems to work.
They made me believe that I could do it, like, because they, you know, a lot of the counsellors, 90% of the counsellors have been through it themselves, and so something about Chip, you know, he's very persuasive, and he's very earnest-wise, you know, he looks you in the eye and he says, like, you know, comrade, I did it, you can do this.
What you have all independently achieved is an incredible thing, and the more people you tell, the better.
Having had a previous experience of alcoholism is incredibly important in this work. This is a condition that responds very well to being treated by somebody who's had the condition. I wanted to use every single day, and I don't think there was a day in 18 years when I willingly went without a drug. There were days when I did, because I was either locked up in a prison cell or a police custody or something like that, but never willingly.
Anecdotally, Chip was an armed robber in and out of Nick all the time. I hope you don't mind me telling them this. And other people. What is interesting when you sort of see Chip and Noreen, people that seem sort of like immensely capable and that have an incredible impact on the lives of not countless, you could count them, like loads of drug addicts and alcoholics. Is like, you know, when we listen to their stories, both of them were like fucking hardcore nutters, weren't they? Like Chip, sometimes when he reminds me of his using, I always think, remember to include that when you take his advice, that you're listening to a madman.
I had been put in front of psychiatrists, psychologists, probation officers, various drug workers, alcohol workers, all these people. And there was always a part of me that felt, you don't really understand what it's like to have to live on the street. You don't understand what it's like to have to find somewhere to sleep every night. You don't understand that you've got to steal sometimes. You don't get that at all. So being able to talk to somebody who you knew had that experience made being open and honest about it much easier, because you kind of knew you weren't going to get judgment back, you were going to get somebody having empathy for you.
You don't feel as weird or you know, as ostracized by society when you're surrounded by, you know, like-minded junkies.
Before I was at Focus, my life was absolute hell. I had an awful childhood growing up. I grew up in a family full of addicts, and it just seemed like the normal thing to me. Focus has completely changed my life, and I'm ever so grateful and grateful to Chip. But thank you.
There is still a perception in this country that an alcoholic stereotypically sits on a park bench in a dirty Mac and just sort of mumbles hysterically into their beard.
Crazy drunk driver.
Basically, I was, well, I hate the word functioning alcoholic, but I was. I had a good job, lovely house, lovely kids, lovely wife, but I was an alcoholic. I couldn't do without a drink every day.
Ironically, I gleaned some form of success in my career, but by that stage, I was already sort of a full-blown alcoholic and lost everything, my marbles, everything. I ended up living in a hostel, getting this tooth knocked out by someone because I asked them to turn their music down, and I was picking up butts off the street, and I was walking down. I was picking some butts off the street around Oval Station, and I had this trick of bending down, tying up my shoelaces and picking a butt up and putting it in my pocket and doing the same trick because everyone's passing by. And I just picked a butt up and put it in my pocket. I was still quite presentable in a way. And someone said, "Excuse me." I went, "Oh, hello." I thought, "Oh, fuck, they've seen me pick up a butt." And he went, "Were you the guy in the office?" And I went, "Oh, yeah."
Well, if he doesn't mind us laughing at him, what harm's been done?
But I just went through this whole game of shaking his hand, and I walked away, and I just thought, oh my God, what, you know, if he knew the truth.
Do I look like an alcoholic? God, no. Do I look like I'm recovered from alcoholism? Probably not, actually, but what are we waiting for? Who the hell does? If I don't look like an alcoholic, who the hell does? Who are we waiting for? Who is it that's got the big sandwich board saying party time? Nobody looks like that. It's delusions like that we have to cut through.
We use terms like regular drinker when we mean alcoholic. We try always to minimise the possible understanding of the harms of alcohol, whereas we maximise our perceptions of harms of other drugs.
When I talk about the person I was when I was an alcoholic, it feels like I'm talking about a different person.
The life that I have now compared to the life that I had when I was drinking is incomparable. I don't look the same. I don't recognise myself when I see photos. Everything about my life has changed so much. I'm very happy now. Life is bigger. I see things now, I experience things. I have interests that aren't inside of a pub.
The personal transformation that I've undergone from being a hopeless, hapless, ridiculous drug addict with no future, no chance, no hope, to being an equal, valid member of this community is perhaps something that we can spread. Like, you all know what it was like when you were out there using. Even those of you that aren't junkies or drunks, you know people that are. And it seems desperate and it seems hopeless. It's horrible when you've got someone in your life that's suffering from this disease. It's horrible. There doesn't seem like a way out. Well, there is. You know, like through the practice of certain principles and the support of other addicts, there's a way out of it.
I ended up coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. I saw guys in their teens, I saw girls in their teens, in their 20s and their 30s, men and women from all walks of life. And these guys seemed to have a solution, and I was attracted to what I saw. I don't know why I'm an alcoholic, and it's irrelevant. The thing is relevant is I've found a solution.
I know that my story isn't unusual at all because I set a website up and I talked about the really grim, horrible things that happened to me in an average day. And it went crazy. It went insane. I had emails from places I've never been, people I've never seen, saying that's how I feel. I'm shocked by the 21-year-old girls who email me, and boys, saying, I've been an alcoholic for 5 years, my parents don't know I live at home. I'm shocked by the 22-year-old girl that says to me, this is my third go in rehab. I know I'm going to die, but my parents aren't taking it seriously. I always think, oh, nothing's going to shock me today. And then I hear another story. We're facilitating alcoholism. We're killing our children. We're killing our young people. And it's fine, because for one person to admit they have a problem, it's for everyone to admit that actually we all have a little bit of a problem. It's crazy that we're this much in denial when it's all around us.
The UK is not alone when it comes to problems with alcohol. But there is something about British culture which seems to foster illogical attitudes to drinking.
I think drinking in this country is seen as something that's very humorous.
And I mean, the first time I got drunk, I was 9 at a New Year's party. My relatives just thought it was funny.
It's become a cultural thing now, you know? You know, let's go out and get pissed.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
There's a lot of pent-up aggression in people. I mean, it's a way of releasing it, isn't it?
Oh, she fell over. She's been drinking more than us.
The damage alcohol does to British society is immense.
It's the biggest public health disaster we face.
I think there are a particular group of factors about the UK that are not sort of instantly linked, but when you put them together, you can kind of understand why we are where we are.
A large part of it is actually to the British kind of stiff upper lip thing, not talking about our feelings.
We're not taught to open up and just be, you know, and cry and hug your dad and you show your emotions. So it's all kept in, and the only way to release it is through drink and drugs.
To me, I think a lot of it's got to do with that British attitude to life, to Britishness, and that strength and that steel.
This is England, the mighty, powerful Britannia. We're so proud, Britannia rules the waves.
If there's a pre-existing emotional or spiritual condition, like if you're a bit unhappy, alcohol can easily be seen as something to fill that gap.
I think that we're bored, I think we're depressed, I think we're scared, and I think as a nation we're medicating.
If you were to look at the British media, you would get the impression that, you know, drunkenness is completely unacceptable and we're kind of obsessed with how awful it is, and youth antisocial behaviour is a major focus. I would say that by focusing on it, we have glamorised it.
Current policy in Britain seems to be largely the strapline, drink responsibly. You know, everyone knows that alcohol takes away that sense of responsibility. It's embarrassing if anyone really believes that that is a policy.
And until we take on the drink industry and some of the vested interests, we will not start to see the problem resolved in the way that we need it.
Who in this room would like to see prohibition?
Were we to suddenly remove alcohol, there would be an awful lot of people who would be really, really struggling.
Prohibition in the United States created more death and murder in American history than any time other than the Civil War. So prohibition's certainly not the answer.
A lot of people are just stupid, you know. Put some antibiotics in the water, I don't know, get rid of it all.
It's not going to go away. We have a love affair with alcohol.
Alcohol is a lubricant, it's like the blood in our veins.
Drinking is absolutely embedded in culture.
It's kind of everywhere. It's part of our religion.
It sounds silly, but weather. I think weather has a lot to do with it. There is often bad weather and people socialise inside.
I mean, you know, there was a time where the pub was probably the only place on the street that was warm, you know, that had a whole load of amenities that you would associate with socialisation.
Greater state intervention, higher taxes, more commercial restrictions do not address the societal attitudes that we must alter.
We're not teaching our children how to be responsible around alcohol because we're not responsible around alcohol. Who's going to teach us?
I think the way forward is one of education to help people understand the damage caused by alcohol.
I think there's a lot more that we could be doing about honestly educating people about drugs. It's no good just going into schools and saying drugs are bad, stop it.
People seem to need to take drugs and drink one way and another. We need to provide these people with the support that they need.
It's one of the easiest areas to cut funding, and no politician is going to stand up and propose for greater care of the addicts and alcoholics in this country.
We can't be judgmental, we can't be pejorative, we shouldn't be punitive. Until we have a compassionate, empathetic approach, we won't solve the problem.
That's enough. It is enough now for us to say, stop.
If anybody came up with a solution, you'd be a millionaire.
How many more people need to end up like my uncle? How many more people need to die? Britain has an alcohol problem, but what's it going to take for us to admit it? To put down that bottle, to wake up without a hangover.
There come a lonely night, you can't escape my mind. From a broken bough, fall into finite space, with a roof torn down, this house is an empty place. Thought I saw Jesus come down, dressed like a soldier. I used to cry